A few months ago, I visited Jekyll Island, Georgia. I wanted to see where the concept of our Federal Reserve System was hatched. I knew it was there thanks to a book written by our guest that we have today, G. Edward Griffin, a writer, documentary film producer, and founder of Freedom Force International. He's listed in Who's Who in America. He's well known because of his talent for researching difficult topics and presenting them in clear terms. Now, 30 years ago, this month, Creature from Jekyll Island was published about the origins of the Federal Reserve. So many people ask me, hey, Kevin, have you read this book? Well, it was researched and written by Griffin in his early 60s. He's 93 now. I tracked him down and began a conversation. I decided to invite him into the Economic War Room. Welcome, Mr. Griffin, to the Economic War Room.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I got a kick on that. You tracked me down. I thought, well, here I am. What are you going to do with me now?
Well, you've lived an amazing life. It's been pro-America, pro-liberty your whole life. And so I'm so excited to speak with you. You're still in the fight. You're not retired. You're still operating, right?
Retired. I don't know what that means. I've heard that word, but I don't understand it. I had a lot of friends getting up in years, and it seems like when they retire, whatever that is, first thing you know, they're gone. So I decided, whatever that is, I don't want to do it.
Well, I'm glad you're not doing it. All right, Economic War Room is fighting the fight, similar to what you've done for pretty much your whole career. We talk about the bad problems, the good solutions, and the beautiful. What could happen if we bring individual liberty back to the Constitution and the things that our founders stood for? So let's start with some of the problems that you see. What's happening in America today?
Well, what's happening in America, a lot of things are happening, of course. Everybody understands that. Everywhere you look, you see what we might consider to be decay of the American dream, decay of the American ideal. And unless you're really serious about this, it's hard to understand what that means. I mean, decay, we know it's not as good as it used to be. We know that the growth of government is all around us. And conversely with that, the more government grows, the less individual freedom we have. They seem to be opposed to each other. You can't have government regulations and freedom to act as you choose at the same time. So what's happening today is a continuation of what was happening in America even before I was born. I thought I was born into the America of the history books. I learned about the Constitution. I learned about our founding fathers. I learned about the fact that George Washington was expected to become the next king because we won the Revolutionary War. Even the colonialists said, well, are you going to be our king now? That was the thinking, the mindset of everybody in the world, that we've got to have a king because all countries have kings. And I became aware that, America was the first deviation from that path. It was a deliberate rejection of that royalty concept, the imperial leader, the dominant force over the common people. I thought, boy, I'm so glad I was born into this. And I didn't realize that as I was thinking that as a child, already our country had been eroded at the roots, and very few people knew it. And I didn't discover it until later on. And when I retraced the thread back to the origins, I thought, oh my gosh, this was a trend that started almost from the very beginning, where people were attracted to government because, well, governments and large institutions of all kinds, wherever you find a concentration of wealth, money, and power over other human beings, it becomes like a magnet to the predator class. And people start going, oh, I want to be working in the government because that's where the money is and that's where the power is. And it doesn't take long before this magnet pulls in the predator class. And people who are enjoying all their liberties and freedoms and benefits, they don't think about those things. They don't want to be involved in politics. So gradually the system begins to get corrupted, and you don't see it at first. In fact, when you're born into it, you don't even look for it. So what's happening today, the short answer, is it's a continuation of what happened almost from the very beginning. It's the erosion of personal liberty and the growth of government power, because the predator class has been attracted to the government. Wow. And to the media and all other institutions of power and money. And we have been sitting around saying, oh, this is a wonderful ride. Now the ride's getting bumpy, the wheels are coming off, and we're saying, what happened? Well, it's still happening, but it started a long time ago.
Well, in fact, to that point, I was watching a video that you made. I'm guessing the 1950s, about color, communism, and common sense. And you introduced us to Manning Johnson. And then I watched that in the midst of the Black Lives Matter, and I was like, this is the same repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. For example, I knew through a friend, Dr. Cleon Scouts, and I met Eldridge Cleaver and the Black Panthers and realized this is communism recycled, trying to use critical race theory, Patrisse Cullors, and all of that. It's the same thing. So it's been going on from the 50s. And then I watched another video that you did that was amazing with an interview with Yuri Bezmenov in 1984, the 4 stages of ideological subversion. And those are really coming back. So you've been studying and following this for decades.
Yes, I have. And I don't know why, because when I went through school, I was hardly what you would call a scholar. I went to school for the real reason you go to college is to have a good time, you know. And I was not interested in learning anything, only those things which I had to get out the other side. But later on, when I finally was married and I had a wife and all of a sudden a couple of little kids to take care of, something changed. I discovered that I had this crusader gene. I had a concept that I needed to be responsible for the benefits I had. Now, I know that's what the older folks teach to the young kids, but nobody taught that to me that I'm aware of. It just became aware. I think it's part of all of our makeup, part of our genetic code. As we get older, we figure out why we're here. So anyway, it's a long journey, and everybody goes through it.
And you want to pass liberty on to future generations. You want to pass the liberty that we once knew as a nation, that you've watched slowly taken away from us. And Bezmenov in 1984, which is an ironic time period, right? You know, Orwell's novel, 1984, he warned us about psychological warfare, demoralization. He warned us that we would start to believe things, you know, people could tell you things that are patently false. You could see obviously are false, and yet people started to believe it.
Yes, they had no choice because they'd been conditioned mentally. And of course, that's the whole big topic, that the warfare changed at that point from primarily a military conflict to a conflict of ideas. And so that's where we are today. Ideas are destroying us, not the military.
All right, we're going to need to take a break, but I want to talk about, when we come back, about the creature from Jekyll Island, because we're seeing central bank digital currencies emerge, we're seeing the creature morphing, and I think you might have some insights on what we need to do about that. We'll be right back after a break. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. We're speaking with G. Edward Griffin. He's an incredible author. He dives into intricate research to understand what the topic that he's presenting to us, and he makes it very simple, easy to read. Just like this book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, he actually went and got a Certified Financial Planner designation, a CFP. Now, I have a CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, but he wanted to understand money and how it operates. Tell me, when you took on this task of studying the Federal Reserve, what were you thinking?
I'm laughing because I asked myself that same question after I was on the path. I thought, what am I thinking? Why am I doing this? Because I had no idea how much voltage was in the wire I was about to grab hold of, you know. I was the least qualified person, you might say for sure, to take on the task of writing a book on monetary theory and banking and all that sort of thing. I thought, well, it's just a few principles, and I can learn almost anything if it doesn't take too long, you know. But anyway, yeah, what was I thinking? I was thinking that it would be easy. I was thinking it would be a simple matter, and it was not. But I was thinking more than that. I was thinking that I had to know this information, because by this time, Kevin, I was already, I had been encouraged to put on the road one of the talks I had assembled at an invitation from a group of ladies in Pasadena, little old ladies in Pasadena. They're real. And this lady invited me to speak on taxes, and that was at a tax study group there. I said, well, Madeline, or whatever her name was, I don't know much about taxes, except that they're too high, and I'm against them. What more can I say? But I could talk to you about a hidden tax. Now, the reason I said that is because I had done some research on the Federal Reserve System a few months prior to that, or what few months, because I was going to produce a low-budget documentary film, I thought, on inflation and the cause of inflation. Well, that led me to the engine of inflation, which is, of course, the Federal Reserve System, because they have the power to make the money. And but I never did produce the film because it turned out to be too gigantic a project. And everywhere I looked, I said, oh, my God, I got to learn about that, and I got to learn about this. I'll never get it done. I better do something simpler. So this lady asked me to give a speech, and I said I could talk about a hidden tax. And she said, what's that? I said, well, you just have to retain me for the speech, and you'll find out. Well, I did tell her what it was, but that's how it started off. So I gave the speech. I'll make this a little bit shorter. And it was well received, and the people in the audience there said, that was good, Ed. You should put that on the road. Okay, well, you never should say anything like that to a public speaker, because that's exactly what they will do. And that's what I did. I put that presentation, fleshed it out a bit, and I started doing a series of one-day seminars called A Crash Course on Money. And it was well received, too. And I was having a good time. People thought I really knew what I was talking about. And I did a little bit about the Federal Reserve and inflation and that sort of thing. And then one day, at the end of one of those presentations, another little old lady approached me. She said, Mr. Griffin, that blew my mind, because here I am, a young, practically a kid. She's an older lady. She said, what should I do with the little bit of money I have? My husband died and left a small inheritance, and I don't know, should I get out of debt, like you said? Should I have gold and silver? How should I protect myself against this thing called inflation? How should I invest? And I thought to myself, I haven't the foggiest idea how to answer this woman's question. And right there on the spot, I decided, I'm a fraud. I'm offering myself as though I know something. I know a little bit, but I don't know enough. So I stopped giving those seminars, and that's when I enrolled for the College for Financial Planning. Not because I wanted to become a financial planner, which I never did. I just wanted to learn about the real world of money and investments so that I wouldn't be caught off guard. So that's how it all started. And of course, a lot of steps like that along the way occurred afterwards, where I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm ignorant on this too. And it's actually a process that, believe it or not, continues to this day, because the field of money and banking it affects almost everything in our lives. Everything we do, it represents at some level some kind of a transaction between human beings, and that transaction generally has an economic value somewhere down the line.
Well, the money we have today, historically, is very different from what we had 150 years ago or whatever. It is very different. In 1913, and you tell the story brilliantly, a cabal got together and decided, well, we're going to control the money of America. And instead of it being very diverse, it became very centralized. And it's, you know, is it federal? Is it government? Is it a reserve? I don't think it's either, but it's called the Federal Reserve, right?
Oh, that's right. They were very clever in deciding how to sell this to the gum-chewing public and to the politicians, which I don't know what they were chewing about. Anyway, politicians can be bought, we find out, as we get older. All the people we think are such noble characters, not all of them, but many of them at least, are really con artists, and they can be purchased with money. So that's where the evil begins.
Well, basically what you came up with, it was a centralized, and now I've watched Jared Bernstein He's an economist for President Biden, and I watched him try to explain how it is, why do we print money, and if we print money, why do we have to borrow money as a government? And the answer is in your book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, because there's something in between the government printing money and then having the money. It's controlled by that Federal Reserve entity. And he couldn't explain it. I don't know if you've seen that clip, but it's hilarious.
No, I haven't.
I'll send that to you.
Well, a lot of experts, so-called experts, can't explain basic principles. And I don't really hold them responsible for that, except they ought to do what I did and look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm a fraud. I don't understand this thing. I better stop pretending and get some knowledge. That they don't do that because that's not why they're there. But it is a complex thing. And but when you finally figure it out, you think, oh, well, that's so simple. Actually, it's simple. And the reason it appears complex is because you can't believe it's that simple. For example, how do you summarize the whole concept of the Federal Reserve System in just a few minutes? Well, I learned how to do it on the road speaking on this topic because they always gave me a very limited time. How do you develop everything that's in the book into a soundbite for the TV station that night, you know? And I was able to condense the whole thing down to 3 words, and that they're totally accurate. So here it is.
Okay.
The Federal Reserve System now. It's a fraud. Okay. That's the complete explanation. Once you understand it's that simple, then all these other complex things melt away because you realize it's just a show.
Well, there's so much about it that's a show, and it is simple, but how we got here is a complicated journey. You've written a brilliant book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's now out for 30 years. I want to talk about one aspect of that book when we come back, but we're going to have to take another break first. We'll be right back with the treasure map. Here's a $10 bill. It's got the picture of Alexander Hamilton on the front of it. You know, it's kind of sad. When I was 10 years old, everything that I could buy for $1 now costs about $10. That's the cost of inflation. It's just paper. It's not backed by anything. You can't exchange it for gold and silver. You used to, but you can't do that anymore. And that's unfortunate. You know, pirates wouldn't accept this. Pirates, they wanted gold and silver. Patriots, the founders of this nation, also wanted gold and silver coin. In fact, they put a provision in the Constitution, 17 words, that said states could only make gold and silver coins tender within the states. That's why I wrote this new book, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. It will explain exactly the history of money and exactly why gold and silver coins can be made modern with new technology and a useful monetary system. PirateMoneyBook.com.
I'm Kevin Sorbo. When you spend money, you consider who you're buying from and the causes they support. If you don't, then you're likely supporting companies that are trying to destroy our country and take away our freedoms. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're a cell phone company and a good one. They offer nationwide coverage on the best 4G and 5G networks along with 100% US-based customer support. But here's the deal. Patriot Mobile's mission has nothing to do with cell phones. They carry out their mission by giving back millions of dollars every year to Christian conservative causes that are actively engaged in the fight to save America. Voting is no longer enough to beat the woke. We have to band together, support like-minded companies, and vote with our dollars. That's how we win. Stop supporting companies that want to destroy America and join Patriot Mobile today by visiting patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
We're speaking with Mr. G. Edward Griffin. He's the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's been out 30 years. It's an amazing book. It's got a fabulous chapter. I think it's chapter 15, titled The Treasure Map. And I just want to point out to you, we have a pirate money treasure map. And when you open it up, a lot of young people don't know how to open a map today because they just look at the app and they see this. But we have a treasure map, and it starts right here. It's a pathway to get to state-based economic freedom. That's the treasure. And it all started here. It says Jekyll Island, where we were shipwrecked in 1913. So it starts from where the pirates were shipwrecked and how they're going to get, and obviously if we're talking pirates, we're talking silver pieces of 8 and gold doubloons because that's pirate treasure. But that is really, I believe, the answer to our monetary problems. And in fact, in your book, Mr. Griffin, you mentioned that the dollar was supposed to be 371.25 grains of fine silver, or a Spanish milled dollar. That's the treasure map. Find the real treasure.
Well, that's it. And it focuses on the fact that we need to be clear as to what money is. What is money? When I was younger, I thought, well, that's easy. Everybody knows what money is. You reach in your pocket, oh, there's a $10 bill. That's money, you know, or some silver coins. Now that's money. Well, that's the form of the money, but you have to think of it in terms of concept. What concept is it? And of course, if you follow that path, you come up with a very simple understanding, and that money is simply defined as a medium of exchange. Sometimes you want what the other person has, and he wants what you have. But if you can exchange directly, that's barter. That's not money. There's no money involved. You just change one thing for the other. But if you don't really want what he has, and he wants what you have, but you figure that if he gave you what he has, and you can swap that immediately with somebody else, well, then you'll take it as a temporary measure because it's what they call a storehouse of value. You know, plenty of people will take it. And that's why money in the early days was always something very, very useful, like food. That was money. In fact, the whole thing comes from the word for cattle in Latin. Money is cattle. That's because the early form of money was you don't have a cow, you don't want a cow, but you'll take the cow because you know everybody else wants a cow. And so pecunia, that's the word. It means cow in that Latin language. And the earliest forms of money were jars of wheat. And then finally there were blocks of metal because they could take iron and make that into a sword or a shield. Now that's very valuable in the primitive society if you want to protect yourself against marauders and bandits. So you could always get rid of a block of good metal like iron, and then when that was easy to make, that wasn't enough, it wasn't scarce enough, so all of a sudden became gold and silver. Everything that's been good money in the past is a medium of exchange of something that has intrinsic value itself, and that's why everybody's willing to take it and swap it around. Okay, well, that's it. So I sort of got off the track there. I think I lost a wheel along the way.
From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible talks about money as gold and silver and sometimes copper. In the Constitution, it talks about only gold and silver as legal tender. And you've covered that in your book. So you list some things. What do we do? Because in your book, you make a quote. There's a quote on page 507. It took 198 years for the government to borrow $1 trillion. Now we've borrowed $35 trillion formally, much, much, much more than that in unfunded liabilities. But 198 years to borrow $1 trillion, 50 years since then, we've increased that debt 35-fold. We see trouble coming. And the Bible says if you see trouble coming and prepare for it, you're wise. But the fool goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. You list some things here that we could do. I think we may be way past abolishing the Fed. But we think that if you bring a parallel system and go back to gold and silver at the state level, you list some things. You said get out of personal debt, with mortgages as a logical exception, maybe businesses, but don't borrow for consumption. Pick a sound bank, diversify your investments. Those are the first three things. Avoid the best performers in investing. This sounds like your CFP is paying off. When investing in coins, avoid those things. What would you give as the best advice for people today? You studied the course. What's the answer now?
Well, let's see. This is perhaps the most important part of our discussion, isn't it? Is what do we do about this problem? Now, all the things you mentioned are things that we can do and should do, but probably are not going to do. Most of us don't have the ability or the time or the talent to do a lot of those things. So we're restricted. The average person, as long as he stays average, which is a mistake if you can help it. People say, what can the average person do? We're voiceless and so forth. And my answer has always been, well, the average person can't do very much, can't do anything. So because the average person doesn't want to learn anything. The average person is afraid of controversy. The average person doesn't want to stand up and and demand his rights. Average person wants to be loved more than be right, and so forth. So the first step is to stop being average, for God's sake. And people don't want to hear that because they want to feel that they're a victim. You know, we have this victim mentality that's being taught to us. And we can't do anything, and we just need somebody else to tell us what to do. Well, that's the first mistake, is to stop. I mean, first mistake to overcome is to stop being average. Now, we can do all those things, probably not going to do most of them, but there are some things we need to stockpile and be prepared for a collapse of the society. Hope it never happens, but better to be safe than sorry. But now we come back to the statement you made. You made a Federal Reserve System. But my friend, if we don't abolish the Federal Reserve System, it will abolish America. We will never have long-term solution until we get rid of the evil thing that's eating away at our gut right now. As long as that's there, there's no long-term solution. It'll just continue to get worse and worse. So the second thing we need to do, in addition to protecting ourselves and our immediate environment and our ability to survive, we better start thinking seriously about joining together and changing the system and abolishing everything that resembles the Federal Reserve, which is private control of money, determining what money is, forcing you to accept it, whether you like it or not. Once we have freedom of money, and we can use whatever we want, Disneyland books or something, you know, if we have the freedom to choose, we will choose gold or silver eventually, because that's the way it always works.
All right. Well, I've loved our interview. Pirate money is all about that individual choice, that you don't have to stay in the Federal Reserve System. You can have state-based gold and silver. You could transfer it electronically, or you could write checks, or you could hold it physically. But the point is, it's real money. So I am so grateful to you and the pioneering work you've done with the creature from Jekyll Island. Now, we're going to summarize all of this in our free economic battle plan. You can get your copy at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.